The Miracle of Grief, Intimacy with God by Angela Patterson. Audio book sample including Introduction, Chapter 1, and part of Chapter 17. Introduction. Psalm 25:14. The secret of the Lord is with them that fear him, and he will show them his covenant. Journal entry from November 23rd, 2024. Good morning, Lord. My heart is running free with you. You are my all in all. You showed me a mountain of grief that I had been going around and around and around in cycles. I had asked over and over to come off that mountain. I was hurting and weary, yet you continued to take me around the mountain. You ignored my plea to come down off that mountain and walk in flat and even places. You asked me if I was willing to face my deepest fears and address the very worst places of my past. I gave you my yes, Lord, but you knew I did not know what yes meant. You went digging down into the center of that volcanic mountain and found the deepest places where pain had been suppressed. But under the pain you revealed deep and unmet needs, heart needs that had left heart wounds. And it was these unheard and unaddressed wounds that kept me circling the mountain of grief and pain. But you were there on the mountain, and every circle around was also drawing me higher and closer to you. And the pain of grief became the fuel for intimacy. You drew me up the mountain, and I found you in the drawing. When you revealed the parallel journeys of intimacy and grief, then I found you on that mountain. I stopped asking to go down and walk once again on the flatlands. But coming up the mountain meant there were peaks and valleys along the way. I looked back to see the way I had come. Oh yes, now I see. The valleys were the places the fruit was born. The peaks were the places I sat with you to eat the fruit, to feast at your table in the wilderness. But all the while my path was upward and higher on that mountain of grief. Finally, partway up the mountain, I realized that I was no longer on the mountain of grief, but had somehow, somewhere crossed over to the mountain of praise. When I paused to catch my breath, I also realized that music was playing continually. I heard it in the trees, in the swaying of the flowers, in the rippling of the grass. I heard it in the quiet streams and the rushing mighty rivers. I heard it in the chirping of the birds and in the gentle breezes. I heard it in the rushing winds. I heard it in the sunshine and in the storm. I heard it in the night sky from unnumbered stars. I heard the praise of heaven descending on that mountain, and I stood in awe of my Creator. He had carried me from the mountain of grief to the mountain of praise and held me right up next to his heart. Strength returned to my broken heart because his word had been my medicine. He had held me until I could walk again, and now he was inviting me to run with him. Have you ever run with God? Imagine the picture, God himself offering outstretched hand, your hand in his, and running free. The mountain of praise opened wide on its top with all nature singing his praise, and he, Creator of the universe, offering the lowly of his creation his hand to run and not be weary, to walk and not faint. And then I recorded what I felt was God's voice to me. Dear daughter, yes, I have invited you to run free with me. I have brought you up a mountain and then carried you across to an adjacent mountain. I have sustained you in the valleys and rejoiced with you on the peaks. Stay with me. You've been faithful in the wilderness. Now I am faithful to you. Do not be afraid. I will not leave you. I won't let you down. I will not forsake you or forget you. You are mine. You are my miracle. I knew you when I formed you. I knew the plans I had for you. I used your choices to train you and prepare you for my choices and my best. Do not lament the time in the wilderness. It has not been wasted. I am restoring the years the locusts have eaten. I'm restoring them before your eyes. Daughter, do not run from me. Do not be afraid of my work in your life. Just walk with me one step at the time. Chapter 1. Grief is not linear. Psalm 23:4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I awoke that morning on May 14th to find him lying on the floor face down and unresponsive. I rubbed my hand across his back, calling out, "Daddy, Daddy!" But I knew when I touched him that something was terribly wrong. Something did not feel right. He was gone. His spirit had already left his body. This broken man that I loved and called Daddy for the sake of our 7 children and for the same reason that he called me Mama, had fought his final battle with alcohol. Yes, it looked as if the liquor had won that morning, but something far greater had taken place, because this man had called out to Abba, Father, for salvation through Jesus Christ in the final years of his life. Life had crossed over into death, but death is only a doorway into the eternal. No, he never got victory over the alcohol. He never knew how to actually receive the freedom and the love of God in its fullest measure on this earth. But he had called upon the name of the Lord for salvation from his sins. And Romans 10:13 says, "For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved." In death, this became his life verse, and I was depending on it. What he failed to grasp in its fullness on earth was now his in fullest measure. He is healed and whole and resting in the love of God in its fullest measure. Grief is not linear. I heard that statement over and over right after my husband died and have continued to hear it since then. At the time of this writing, it's only been a little over 6 months ago that I joined the precious category of ladies called widows. And in these 6 short months that have felt like 6 weeks, and yet at the same time a lifetime ago, I have come to agree with this statement about grief not being linear. But what does grief have to do with my testimony? And what does grief have to do with intimacy? Well, as most of you well know, grief becomes a major piece of our testimony after we lose our husbands or any loved one. How we navigate through the grief determines our testimony going forward. A testimony is a verbal or written account of each of our stories and how each has unfolded. A testimony can also be a verbal or written account of God's story written into our lives. So I would love to begin by sharing a short version of my story before I became a widow. Then I'd love to share how God has added to that pre-widow story and built upon it after the death of my husband. Chapter 17. The miracle of intimacy. Psalm 18:33. He maketh my feet like hinds' feet, and setteth me upon my high places. I was on the precipice of an ever greater breakthrough. Why? Because I was being so real and so transparent with Abba Father. I was bringing him everything, every thought, every feeling, every emotion, and asking him to look underneath it and find out what needed to be addressed. I had quit trusting myself a long time ago, early in this journey. Carrying around this little paper journal and using it to pause and talk to him all through the day had become better than a cell phone. That's intimacy, when I want to talk to him more than anyone else. I wrote in my journal again. Honestly, Lord, our relationship, referring to Dino and myself, had degenerated to the point that because of the alcohol and drunkenness, we still had each other in physical presence only. We still loved each other with as much love as we were capable of. We had physical connection, and we had purposed in our hearts a long time ago to stay married for life. We had attachment, but we had lost meaningful communication. That hurt so much. Meaningful communication is the best part of intimacy. What remained in our marriage without communication was very difficult, But Lord, you were enough for me then, even in that lack. I looked to you. I looked to you with all my heart because I was a married woman. I didn't look at other possibilities then. So just because it's legal now, why would I consider it for the future now in an attempt to try to fill the void and emptiness that I feel without Dino's physical presence? I still have you just as I had then. You are all that I need. And that was the close of that journal entry. I absolutely hated those thoughts that kept rolling in like attacks from a battleship. I laid in bed some nights and would cry tears, begging God to protect me from the enemy or even from myself if that was where the thoughts were coming from. My deepest heart knew that God is and was enough for me. A few days later, I got to the 6-month mark of Dino's homegoing. I figured I would take an emotional hit that day. The grandbabies were asleep for nap time, so I allowed myself the luxury of feeling the feelings that were suppressed in my heart. Here comes another wave of feelings into the silence of nap time, I wrote. I am missing Dino so much right now. I want to be in his arms. I want to hold him and to be held by him. I want to tell him that I love him. But I must remember that he is being held and loved on an infinitely greater way than I could ever hold or love him. I can only grieve for the earthly pain that he felt. But that is over now, and I must learn to rejoice with him now. And that was the close of that journal entry. That day was hard, but I expected it to be hard. I did better than I thought I would do, and I was actually a little proud of the progress. But the next day is what I did not expect, and it nearly knocked me over emotionally with pain. I cried and cried and cried every time the grandbabies were not looking at me. When they looked or needed me, I pulled it together and put a smile on my face with red eyes. It was truly the hardest day of all my grief thus far in the journey. It was like a floodgate finally opened and held nothing back. That night, after my little ones were picked up and sent home, I was finally able to write in my journal again. I wrote, "Another day of tears now, no one to run to. You alone, Lord, you alone. Will you meet me here in the pain?" Then a sentence came to my mind that was so true that it startled me. I wrote big across the middle of the page, and this is what I wrote. "Alone with God is one of the most painful places to be until you realize He is there." And then I began to write normally again. After writing that sentence big and bold and letting it sink in, I wrote, "Something in me must be removed, and something missing must be put in. What is it, Lord?" He was going even deeper. Wow, how deep was possible? I felt like everything had already been cut open, laid bare, and cut out. What could possibly be left? But I wanted to heal and be okay badly enough to keep asking. And I knew that I could not heal by bringing my husband back. That was one miracle that would not happen. So what miracle was I asking for? What was still there that had to be removed? And what was missing that needed to be put in? It was a mystery to me, but I was open to finding the answer. The next day I wrote somewhat of a poem as the opening for my journal entry that day. I wrote, "A night of sadness replaced with joy. A night of tears replaced with hope. A night of grief turned into praise. A night given to the Lord. A morning glorious, full of life. A morning glorious, filled with hope. A morning glorious, fresh with wonder. A morning given to the Lord. He will meet you where you are. Turn to Him and find Him near you. He has promised to never leave you. A life given to the Lord." I followed this poem by going back to the statement about pain being the megaphone for God's voice. And I wrote, "If pain is the megaphone for God's voice, and praise is the megaphone for our voice to God, then how should we respond to pain? Praise."